Just a quick thing before we start the video. I mentioned this a couple of days ago in a video, and so I'm just going to do it every so often. Not for too much longer, don't worry. But I do have a second channel. It's called A Bit of Football History. The link is in the description. If you like football, as in soccer, or history, then go and check it out. If you like either of those things, I'm sure you will like it. The channel now has a couple videos. Any help would be greatly appreciated. But now let's get into what you are all here to see. Squirrels! So hello, and welcome to another Legends of Runeterra video. This one is going to be a bit different because Riot, Rubin did a stream and he talked about things on that stream, and so I thought I would talk about the things that, Dr. LoR has put in a big list for us, of the things that Rubin talked about, some of the most important points. So I thought I would just quickly talk about it because some of the things are very interesting. So let's just dive straight in because there is a lot to cover. Obviously, some are more important than others. But let's just dive straight in. So, first things first. Right, Rubin, if you don't know, used to be the live design lead. Now is a set design person. But he's a very important person in terms of, the making of Legends of Runeterra. So Alex Lee seems to be, the new live design person. But there is no true live design team. So this seems to be one of the things that, it's kind of been shaken up. With the sort of changing of balance patches, that there are no live design people anymore, but just sort of hard release people. It's quite interesting. They will have a regular balance patch still though, and emergency patches like the kind of Sliver, not Sliver actually, but Merciless Hunter Rune Runner 1, and the ones where you get like a small patch of like 3 to 5 cards that just try and fix the whatever is dominating. But regrets patching too often whilst he was live design. Now this is probably the one that I think most people will disagree with, probably the most of all of this list. Because I know that I love to run those patches really frequently, and I'm sure a lot of other people that played early on in the game did as well. Because it didn't seem like the game was never broken early on. There was some really strong decks, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't ever, the live design often fixed that rather than pushing it the other way where it broke it. So this is one that I think a lot of people will disagree with. I personally had no problem with them patching every like 2 weeks. To me, that's like a good thing. I wish we could go back to that, to be honest, because there are, and I would call this probably a good time as well, where there's kind of like a lot of like sort of dead points in the game, where there isn't much buzz around the game, there isn't much excitement because things are just kind of the same. And when you patch something every 2 weeks, that never is the case. But I also think 2 weeks is long enough to where you don't get the person who is a very casual player that has no idea what's going on. Like, unless you make massive changes in those 2 weeks, which I wouldn't want. I just want like whatever the top deck is to come down, whatever the strongest cards are to be nerfed, and then maybe a couple buffs. Like, if they could do that every 2 weeks, like, that is the dream. Whatever the best thing is, nerfed a bit. And, some other things get buffed. Or you could even do, like a buff and nerf cycle patch, every 2 weeks. That would be super cool as well. That would be my dream, but it seems like we are not heading in that way, and I'm sure many of you will disagree with it, but let's move on. Live design is doing more to push regions towards their strengths and weaknesses. I think this is very important. I think Runeterra, I mean, maybe it's because I come from Magic the Gathering, where, this is like really, like the colors in Magic the Gathering are really like set in stone, but they have 20 years to figure that out, I suppose. But I think it would be nice if there was more clear boundaries, because it feels like, whilst there are like a couple things you could probably pick out for each region, it does feel like there are a lot of blurred lines in there with what is what. So it would be nice to see that. Next patch will likely be really big, but not as big as 2.11. That's fine. It still probably means like it's going to be 20 cards, maybe 25, something in that range, which would be nice. Landmark removal is weird, and Noxus isn't supposed to be the only region with a good one, so this could mean we're seeing buffs for, I think the intended good ones are meant to be like Targon, Piltover, and Zorn, the Aftershock. I think that those 3 are meant to be the best 3 off the top of my head. So it's possible we could see, like those cards getting buffed. That would be quite nice. Pushback against why print bad cards. LOR has way few other than other CCGs. Every card has a deck. I mean, I'm never had a massive problem with printing back cards. Like I kind of like it, that you can then play those cards in Expedition. The power level is kind of lower in limited formats overall. Don't have a problem with that. And LOL probably does have fewer other than other CCGs. And every card has a deck. I mean, is every card optimal to play in a certain deck? No. Could you make a case that it makes sense at least to play it in a deck, even if it's not the best option? Probably, right? Like, you probably could make that point, and I'm sure that that's probably what they're referring to. Vandal City is bad at protecting units buffs, good at killing small things other than Minimorph. Don't have much evasion except impact. So I have a couple problems with this. Like, yeah, the first, I'm guessing that the question was like, what is Vandal City's like strengths and weaknesses meant to be? Probably because someone is thinking like Vandal City is good at everything. Is it bad at protecting units / buffs? I would say yes. Is it good at killing small things? Yes. Other than Minimorph, this is why I think another reason why Minimorph needs to change. But doesn't have much evasion except impact. I mean, one of its best units is elusive. Like, why? Like, if this is meant to be the thing that they don't have much evasion, why would you make like a 2-mana unit that creates other units? Like, that's one of their best cards. Like, maybe that was unintentional. Maybe they thought it was going to be a bad card, but they also made Kelp Maidens, like, which if there wasn't so many pings in the game and the 2/1 stat line for 2 mana wasn't so bad, that card would be really good as well. I think they would give you the free prank every time it hit the Nexus. Like that, we all thought that was going to be a good card. I think it hasn't been because this, like Pokey Stick and Make It Rain, just make cards like that not that good. Why do they have so much elusive then? Why do they have these 2-mana elusive units that could be very strong, and one of them is very strong? Very odd, I think. Admits Bandle City Mare is probably better than Tristana, so she doesn't have much of a home. I mean, that's just another reason why Bandle City Mare will probably be changed, which is good. And Tristana, I think, will become better, as more dual region cards come out. Tristana's power level will go up, so that's something as well. Region Pie has a dedicated manager. Probably needs an article. Regions have a lot of one-off exceptions, I think this is meant to be. So an article on like what the region pie is meant to be, that would be really interesting. It's interesting that it has like a dedicated person who's focusing on that. That's actually good to know, and it probably links into this that they are going to push more towards making that more clear. Regions having a lot of one-off exceptions. Again, maybe this is something that will get changed. Average game is 7.5 rounds, so high cost cards must be super powerful. Basically, thinks optimal game length is 8 rounds, was down to 7 rounds during Azir Aurelia. So 7.5 right now sounds about right. Where it's a bit too quick. My optimal would probably be 8.5. In between 8 and 9 would be sort of my optimal game length. That's a minor nitpick. I know some people would want it to be 10 or more than 10. Like, that's just not going to happen because, the game, like all card games now, is a casual game. So that's just not going to happen. So I'd say 8.5, but maybe a bit of a nitpick. And so, I mean, if they are saying that, that probably does mean they are looking to slow the game down a bit. So, not all hope is lost. Favorite card design was Akshan, not Aphelios. Okay. Probably not going to rework champions, more likely to do a new version of champ. So this is very interesting. And I know that other people... and who does this affect, right? Because they're probably not going to rework champions. That doesn't mean they're not going to buff champions or nerf champions. Just rework them. They're not going to rework them. Now, are there any champions in the game that, really need to be changed, completely can't work in any semblance of their original form? Personally, I think no. I know a lot of people would say Katarina is probably the most obvious for this. I don't actually think... I think you can buff Katarina. I've said it many times before that I would just make Katarina 2 mana on her first version, keep the second version 4 mana, and get rid of the Fleeting Blade's Edge, because a 2 mana 3/2 with Quick Attack is fine. That's Lucian's thing anyway, so that's not too strong. And by only sacrificing 2 mana rather than 3, you're fine. That's you can play Katarina on turn 2 and still feel okay about it, because now you have this constant rally effect in your hand, right? So I thought that was fine. Also, I think that Katarina has a problem similar, as they mentioned to Tristana here. Katarina's biggest problem is that there are 2 rally effects in the game that are just much better than Katarina. If they were nerfed as well, Katarina would also become better. So I think there is enough to go on with different champions that you don't need to rework them. That each champion can fulfill a niche at the right power level, and that there are things that you can do to get them there. So I actually don't mind that they're not going to rework champions. Interesting that they would do new versions of a champion. Well, I mean, I wouldn't have thought they'd do that before all the champions are out. You know, I wouldn't have thought so, because that would just kind of be a weird thing to do. But we'll see. Thanks, Riot is weaker than Targon right now. Regional strength are about as outlasting you. Weak to big units except Frostbite. Is this Freljord, I think, that we're talking about? I mean, is Freljord weaker than Targon? It's probably close. You know, I think that, you know, I've said this before as well, that like all the people harping on Targon basically are just, you know, people who parrot whatever Swim says. But I think Swim often is kind of, you know, just goes for the like says extreme things just to, you know, make a point, and probably doesn't fully believe them either, because Swim's a smart guy. So yeah, I could definitely believe that Freljord is weaker than Targon. I think that a lot of people only get that perception of Targon because other people have told them that Targon is super weak, and don't play Targon to think that. You know, and I've heard people say, oh, but Targon's only good decks are like, you know, with Zoe and Lee Sin and Zoe and Nami, you know, and you know, they basically use the same package, and it's like, okay, well, that package is still good. You know, it's part of one of the best decks in the game, and part of, you know, a very strong tournament deck in Lee Sin as well. So that package at least is clearly very good. Yes, the rest of Targon might not be that good, but how, like, what? I mean, I guess there's like Sejuani in Freljord. Am I missing something? I don't think so. There's like Sejuani, and that's kind of it for Freljord right now. So I can definitely believe that Freljord is weaker. Shadow Isles is supposed to be weak in card advantage, which is why Stalking Shadows can't be 2 mana. I mean, this one is weird, right? This one is just a weird thing to say. Because Shadow Isles came out with Glimpse Beyond, which was the best card for drawing cards in the game for such a long time. Literally until Stalking Shadows came out, probably. So what an odd thing. If you would have asked me, is Shadow Isles meant to be good or bad at card advantage, I would have said good. Like, this has to be the worst they've ever done at, like, a region strength and weaknesses if Shadow Isles is supposed to be weak at card advantage. Like, it's fine if they think that now, and sure, that means that Stalking Shadows can't be 2 mana, but it probably means that Glimpse Beyond shouldn't exist. But why are they bringing out cards like Spirit Leech as well, that are also good at drawing, that gives you 2 cards? Doesn't make any sense. This can't be true. Shadow Isles has like some of the best card draw in the game, and yes, they nerf Stalking Shadows, and I get that, but then they also print, you know, just like cards that are still good. Like, surely by the time Spirit Leech came out, they would have figured that. And Unto Dusk as well is another one. What's going on? I don't know. Like, there are definitely worse regions by far at card advantage than Shadow Isles, so I just don't understand how that has happened, really. That's a weird one. Streamer is all about champions and landmarks. Attack matters, power effects you have to wait for. I mean, that makes some sense, I guess. You know, I mean, to be fair, Shurima, you know, a lot of Shuriman decks are somewhat reliant on their champions going off, you know, and leveling up, which is a good thing. I think all regions should be about champions, to be honest. Why is it just Shurima? Why don't I have all the regions be about champions? That's the way I'd design the game, at least. But, I mean, Shurima does do that. And it obviously does have a lot of landmarks, and that's good. I mean, maybe more recently, you know, there's maybe some things that you could say that, you know, like Ziggs or whatever, maybe isn't as focused. But why is Ziggs in Shurima? Karina Control was only a 55% plus control deck because it was so easy to play and creatures were smaller. So, for those of you who don't know, Karina Control was way back in the day, kind of when Bilgewater was coming out. And yeah, you know, it was just one of those decks that was, it was super, literally, it was just like, on turn 1 you played this, on turn 2 you know, on turn 1 you played like Hapless Aristocrat, on turn 2 you like waited, you either played a Val Feast on a unit they played, or you waited and saved the mana to play a Val Feast on the next turn. Like, it was just like a constant, like, your options are so clear, like there was never really anything your opponent was going to do that you were like, well, what do I do now? Like, it was just, everything was like just do this, do this, do this, right? And then, you know, say you did pass on the Val Feast, right? Your opponent would attack into you. You trade the Hapless Aristocrat. Then you just play Brood Awakening, which was 5 mana, which you now had on turn 3 at that point. And then you'd have a board full of 4 2/1 spiders. And then, you know, you'd be good. And that was basically the deck. And then on turn 9, you played Karina or Ledros and won. Felt bad about nerfing Heimer because only a 51% win rate deck on ladder. I mean, the thing is, Heimer was toxic, though. It's fine to say that, and I've heard this before, but it's like, Heimer was just toxic. Like, Heimer, when the elusive turrets were 3 mana, it was like, the game was over on turn 5. You know, if they had Heimer, Double Flash of Brilliance, and another 3 mana spell, you'd lost. You'd just lost. You'd have to waste your removal on Heimer, but then in that time, you know, they've also got now 3/1 elusive turrets, and how are you going to get rid of all of that? You know, so say that all you want, and I'm not about, you know, I would buff Heimer. You know, I've said this before, that Heimer needs a lifesteal turret. But that's what the Heimer is lacking. I've got no problem with, you know, making the 3 mana turret a lifesteal one. But when it was elusive, it was just toxic. And it was horrific to play against. I don't care what the win rate was. It was everywhere, and it was horrific to play against. That's all I've got to say. Alternate win conditions feel bad to players, even though cards like Captain Pharaoh almost say that. I mean, Captain Pharaoh, I mean, I will grant, yeah, old Captain Pharaoh definitely used to say that. Captain Pharaoh now, I mean, still does say it to an extent, but if you can survive, like, the hit of the unit, Captain Pharaoh, if you can find a way to kill the unit, you know, you... Obviously, if you're on, like, less than 8 health, then yes, you are in trouble, but, you know, 8, like he says earlier, you know, high cost cards have to be super powerful. You know, when Captain Pharaoh was first buffed to be like the 3 decimate version of him, like people like me and others were screaming, you know, we need more of this and less of the 8+ cost cards you keep printing that are bad. You know, print more Captain Pharaohs. You know, at least I think alternate win conditions just feel bad in general. You know, basically, like Captain Pharaoh, you're never playing Captain Pharaoh when your opponent is on 20 health and winning the game. You know, like, this is a bit of a bad comparison, I think, overall. You know, like, old Ezreal, yes. But that's why old Ezreal had to change. But Captain Pharaoh, like, yes, is a threat if you're on 10 health. But if you're on 20, if you've, like, dominated the game up to that point, you're fine. You know, whereas you can play against Banditry, you can have been in control of the entire game, but just not be able to finish it out quick enough and lose to a Banditry. That can definitely happen. And that is why I think Alternate Wing is so bad. It's because you can have dominated the game, but there's this one thing that you can't deal with. You know, there's kind of a niche threat that you can't deal with. And that's why it feels bad, often, I think. Now that Blade Dances 2, probably some other nerfs can be reverted. Definitely agree. Did a mock redesign of Katarina for fun? That would be interesting. Sucks that Allegiance card were nerfed. Think Gold Ambassador will have its time. What Allegiance cards have been nerfed? So Bannerman got nerfed. Wraithcaller got nerfed a long time ago. Yordle Grifter got nerfed, but that was for completely different reasons. Yordle Grifter got nerfed because there's the value of playing, like, just as not even hitting the Allegiance was worth it to play Yordle Grifter back in the day. So that's why Yordle Grifter got nerfed. Have any others been nerfed off the top of my head? I can't think, but maybe they have. I don't think it sucks. Like those cards got nerfed for a reason because they were too good. I mean, maybe you could revert Bannerman now. Maybe. Which, if you don't know, he used to give himself the +1/+1 as well. Maybe you could revert Wraithcaller now. It used to have Fearsome, and then it didn't. But maybe you could do that. That would be a fun change, I think, actually, reverting Wraithcaller, because you probably would get the Fearsome decks back, which would be quite cool. Aggro is worse than tournament setting. I mean, yeah, pretty much. Activated abilities may eventually be in the game, but it creates a lot of onboard complexity. Activated abilities, for those of you who don't know, so this is basically, you know, you have a unit down, and you can pay a certain amount of mana to use with an ability. Now, you know, whether that happens at fast or burst speed would be really interesting. But yeah, that would create, depending on what it did, of course, that would be very complex in an already complex game. And it would also mean that, you know, like if you fast speed remove or try to remove something, then you can use your activated ability before that goes off, you know, and get whatever activated ability it is. I mean, they probably will eventually go into that because, you know, you start running out of interesting designs to do. So I wouldn't be shocked if that comes. Was surprised people really like Sundisk, despite how bad its win rate was. Didn't expect it to be a competitive deck. It wasn't a goal. And people like Sundisk because, you know, it's different. It's completely different. And people, you know, it's the same thing with Deep. I think what I've noticed in this game is there's a lot of people who just like playing big, stupid things and getting off these ridiculous, crazy win conditions, you know. And that's obviously makes a lot of sense when you say it like that, right? There's a lot of people who like playing that way. And so it's not a shock to me that people like Sundisk because it's interesting and it's different and it's unique and it's like, you know, and it's very rewarding when it comes off. It feels like, you know, you get this extra animation as well. So like, you know, it's cool. But also I agree that, you know, it was probably never meant to be that competitive of a deck in terms of its design, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't, you know, they should neglect it. Like, you know, they could make Sundisk 0 mana. I think that would help. I think it sucks that elite. Oh, right, yes. Then we've got like this copy, I think, of some of them. So what's the next one? I think this is the next one. Swain. Swain was designed in a triad with Sejuani and Gangplank. Yasuo was designed to be paired with Katarina. Pairs aren't always designed to be super competitive, and non-paired decks like Easy, Ezreal Draven, and TF Gangplank are cool. Interesting that Swain was designed in a triad with these. That's something I never would have guessed. I mean, we've seen TF Swain. We've never really seen Gangplank Swain. I think them being the same mana cost doesn't help. And we've seen Sejuani Swain, to be fair. It does make some sense. Like, it's not, you know, completely out. You know, when you think of Swain and pairs that Swain can have, you know, Sejuani would probably be like, you know, probably like third or fourth on the list, something like that. So it's not like completely out of the realm of possibility, right? But, you know, I wouldn't have thought that off the top of my head. Yasuo being paired with Katarina. This is a question I've always had is, was Katarina meant to pair with Garen or Yasuo? Because she's kind of both, right? She's obviously got Rally on her, which is what Garen is. And would kind of make sense to combine them. And obviously, lore-wise, you know, they're kind of in love. So that to me made sense. But it turns out it was with Katarina instead. And so that's quite interesting because obviously she does have the recall. I mean, this whole idea just doesn't, you know, these two champions just, you know, never really made any sense. So whatever. Really likes Gangplank as a well-rounded champ that goes in all kinds of decks. Likes Keg design, maybe slightly too good with Bandle City ping effects. Gangplank has always been like one of my favorite champions. I will never let it go that there was a Reddit post probably about a month after Gangplank came out calling him one of the worst champions in the game and thought he was complete trash, and a lot of people agreed, which was crazy to me because I had been playing a lot of Gangplank, and not, you know, a couple weeks later, you know, there was a Sejuani Gangplank deck that was pretty good, a Plunder deck. So, and obviously we've seen Gangplank in a ton of decks since, and it just has always made me laugh that people thought Gangplank was really bad, because obviously he isn't. And does he go too well with Bandle? I would say the bigger problem is the Bandle City part of it rather than the Gangplank part of it, in my opinion. Gangplank, I've always thought, is one of the best designed champions and has always been at like the correct level. You know, there's champions like Gangplank and Zoe, and like Swain, that I've always thought, like, their designs have always, they're the correct level. Maybe Sejuani you could add into that as well. Like, those are the correct power level of champions, right? Like, good, I mean, Zoe can be frustrating just because, you know, it's Zoe, and it's an elusive, and it's a one-mana card. Like, she can be frustrating for that reason, right? But I think in terms of a power level, they're good, and you would be like, yeah, oh, you're not trolling by playing this card. Like, this is a good card. But they're never, like, dominant. You know, they're never too good to be like, this card really needs to go. So I'm all for them. Foundation set has many region pie exceptions that wouldn't be designed now, like Radiant Guardian Lifesteal. Cithria gives Fearsome. I mean, this is a good point that I've never really thought about, but it's quite interesting. And interesting to see if they revert that. They probably won't, I would have thought, but obviously, you know, when the game was coming out or when they were designing the Foundations card, obviously they probably hadn't set in stone as much of the things that, you know, they have now. But yeah, an interesting point. Will they revert it? I wouldn't have thought so. But who knows? And that was all of it. So I'm interested to see what you guys think. As I say, I think this one is probably the most divisive in there, but there are some others as well. I'm sure the like average game length one will be one that people want to talk about. But overall, I thought this was really interesting. It was worth bringing to your attention. And yes, so thank you so much for watching and have a really nice day.